Under the searing heat of the Arizona sun, Daniel Hayes sat atop his sturdy horse, a figure seemingly pulled from the pages of an old Western novel. However, he was no outlaw or rancher, but a modern wanderer, traversing the endless, undulating sands of Monument Valley. The fiery red rock formations loomed like ancient sentinels, their shadows stretching across the desert floor as the afternoon light cast its golden glow. Daniel, dressed in a faded denim shirt and a wide-brimmed hat, adjusted his position in the saddle. The rhythmic clop of the horse's hooves matched the quiet serenity of the land. His gaze swept across the landscape, pausing only when a hawk soared above, its silhouette gliding effortlessly against the cloudless sky. Even the freest of creatures needs a reason to return, he thought, watching as the bird circled, and then vanished behind a distant mesa. The tranquility of the moment was interrupted when something caught Daniel's attention. In the shimmering distance, a lone figure appeared, staggering through the dunes. His heart skipped a beat. Squinting against the sunlight, he tried to make sense of the sight. It was a woman, her frame draped in dark fabric that billowed in the dry desert wind, as though the elements themselves were conspiring to claim her. "Is it real?" Daniel murmured, unsure if the figure was a hallucination brought on by the relentless heat or an actual person in need. He tugged gently on the reins, halting his horse, and narrowed his eyes to focus. The mirage-like figure became clearer with each passing second, and it was evident this was no illusion. As Daniel approached, the woman's details sharpened into clarity. She was young, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Loose strands of dark hair escaped from beneath her scarf, tangling with the wind. Though her gait was unsteady, an unyielding determination glimmered in her eyes, setting her apart from the desolation that surrounded them. He pulled his horse to a stop a few feet away, his voice calm yet firm as he called out, "Hello there? Are you okay?" The woman didn't respond. Her breathing was labored, and her expression teetered between fear and exhaustion. Daniel dismounted in a swift motion, landing softly on the sand. With slow, deliberate steps, he approached her, hands raised in a gesture of peace. Up close, he saw the tear tracks etched into her dusty face, a stark reminder of the trials she had endured. Yet there was something else there, too, an undeniable strength beneath her vulnerability. "What's your name?" Daniel asked, his voice steady but laced with concern. "And what are you doing out here alone?" She looked up, her dark eyes locking onto his. For a moment her lips trembled, and then she answered, her voice a fragile whisper, "I'm someone with nowhere left to go." The wind picked up, scattering grains of sand around them as Daniel processed her words. His mind raced with questions, but he refrained from pressing too hard. Instead, he extended his hand, his tone leaving little room for argument. "This desert isn't forgiving. You'll need help if you're to survive out here. Come with me." She hesitated, her body tense, and her eyes filled with mistrust. But there was something about Daniel's presence, his calm demeanor, his quiet strength, that nudged her toward trust. Finally, she allowed him to guide her to the horse. He helped her climb into the saddle before mounting behind her. "Hold on," he said as the horse began its steady gait, leaving 2 sets of tracks in the sand. Behind them, the relentless wind began to erase their trail, as if the desert sought to claim its secrets once more. As the horse moved with measured steps over the dunes, the woman's breathing began to even out. Daniel glanced back at her, noticing how she clung to the saddle horn with trembling hands. "Here," he said, reaching for the canteen strapped to his saddle. He twisted the cap off and handed it to her. "Drink slowly." She took the canteen hesitantly, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest of moments. With hands still unsteady, she brought it to her lips and took small sips. The cool water seemed to revive her, and for the first time Daniel saw a flicker of relief in her expression. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the gentle wind. "What's your name?" he asked again, keeping his tone gentle but firm. After a moment's pause, she replied, "Maya." "Maya Ramirez." Daniel nodded, the name rolling over in his mind. "Maya," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "I'm Daniel Hayes. You're lucky I came by when I did. This desert doesn't give second chances." Maya lowered the canteen and met his gaze, her dark eyes reflecting both gratitude and guardedness. "I didn't expect anyone to find me," she admitted. Daniel tilted his head, curiosity evident in his features. "Then why take the risk? This isn't a place you wander into without a plan." Maya hesitated, her fingers tightening around the canteen. Finally, she looked away, her voice laced with quiet defiance. "I had no other choice. I was running from something I couldn't face." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't press further. The pain in her voice was enough to tell him she wasn't ready to share more. Instead, he shifted the focus. "We'll talk when you're ready. Right now, let's get you somewhere safe." They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves filling the void. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, the coolness of evening began to settle over the desert. The sky transformed into a breathtaking canvas of golds and purples, and Daniel couldn't help but steal a glance at Maya. The fading light softened her features, making her look almost serene, despite the dust and fatigue etched into her face. "Where are we going?" Maya asked eventually, breaking the silence. "There's a small outpost ahead," Daniel replied. "It's a ranch owned by a friend of mine. We can rest there, and I'll figure out how to help you from there." Maya's lips parted as if she wanted to protest, but she quickly closed them again. For now, she had no choice but to trust him. By the time they reached the ranch, the stars had begun to dot the night sky. The faint glow of lanterns flickered in the distance, guiding them to a modest yet welcoming homestead nestled among sparse vegetation. The scent of mesquite and the distant lowing of cattle filled the air. A wiry, middle-aged man with weathered features stepped out onto the porch as they approached. His boots scraped against the wooden planks as he squinted at the newcomers. "Daniel," he called, his voice a mix of surprise and relief. "What brings you here at this hour?" Daniel dismounted and turned to help Maya down from the horse. "Found her wandering the desert. She's in rough shape, Sam. Can we stay the night?" Sam's gaze shifted to Maya, his brows furrowing with concern. "Of course. Bring her in. I'll fix up something warm." Maya hesitated on the porch, her eyes darting between Daniel and Sam. She looked like she might bolt at any moment, but Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe here." Inside, the ranch house was simple but cozy. The warm glow of oil lamps illuminated walls adorned with photographs and Navajo rugs. Maya perched on the edge of a worn leather armchair, her movements tentative, while Daniel handed her a blanket. Sam returned with 2 steaming bowls of stew and placed them on the table. "Eat up," he said. "Looks like you could use it." The aroma of the stew filled the room, and Maya's stomach growled audibly. Embarrassed, she glanced at Daniel, who merely smiled and gestured for her to eat. As she took her first bite, a sigh escaped her lips, the warmth of the meal soothing her weary body. Sam sat across from her, his sharp eyes studying her, as he sipped from his coffee. "So, miss," he began, his voice steady, but kind, "what's your story?" Maya hesitated, her spoon hovering mid-air. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her an almost imperceptible nod. I was supposed to marry someone," she said finally, her voice trembling. "A man I didn't choose. My family arranged it, and I couldn't go through with it. So I ran." Sam leaned back in his chair, his expression softening. "That's a brave thing you did. Not easy to turn your back on everything you know." Maya's gaze dropped to her bowl. It didn't feel brave. It felt desperate. Daniel, who had been leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, spoke up. "Sometimes desperation is what pushes us to fight for what we deserve. You did what you had to do." Maya looked up at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of judgment. Instead, she found only understanding. Later that night, as the household settled into silence, Daniel stepped outside, his boots crunching against the gravel. The cool night air was a welcome relief after the day's journey. He leaned against the porch railing, his gaze fixed on the endless sea of stars. Behind him, the door creaked open, and Maya stepped out, clutching the blanket he'd given her. She hesitated for a moment before joining him. "I wanted to say thank you," she said quietly, her voice carrying a vulnerability he hadn't heard before. "For helping me, for not asking too many questions." Daniel turned to her, his expression soft. "You don't need to thank me. Everyone deserves a second chance." Maya nodded, her gaze dropping to the ground. After a moment she said, "Do you think the desert can forgive us for running away?" Daniel's brow furrowed slightly as he considered her words. Finally he replied, "The desert doesn't care why we're here. It's just there, testing us, shaping us. But maybe it's not about forgiveness. Maybe it's about finding a way to forgive ourselves." Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she absorbed his words. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope, fragile but real. As the stars twinkled above, the desert seemed to hold its breath, as if listening to the quiet exchange between two souls, seeking solace in its vast expanse. The following morning, the ranch awoke with the first rays of sunlight creeping over the horizon. The faint crowing of a rooster and the distant rustling of cattle stirred Daniel from his sleep. Stretching, he rose from the modest cot Sam had prepared for him in the barn. The air was crisp, carrying the earthy scent of hay and wood smoke. After splashing his face with cool water from a nearby trough, Daniel made his way to the main house. Inside, he found Maya already awake, sitting by the kitchen window. She was wrapped in the same blanket, her gaze distant as she cradled a steaming mug of coffee. The soft light filtering through the curtains highlighted the delicate features of her face, now free from the grime of the desert. "You're up early," Daniel remarked, leaning against the doorway. Maya looked up, her expression softer than the night before. "Couldn't sleep much. Too many thoughts." Daniel nodded, understanding all too well the burden of a restless mind. "Sam's probably out tending to the horses. I'll see if he needs help." He hesitated, then added, "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need." Maya's lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes betrayed lingering uncertainty. "Thank you for everything. I'm not sure what I would have done if you hadn't found me." Before Daniel could respond, the door swung open, and Sam entered, his boots tracking a trail of dust across the floor. "Morning," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "Coffee's on the stove. Got biscuits and some eggs, too." Maya stood, hesitant. "Can I help with breakfast?" she asked, her voice tentative. Sam raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Sure. Grab that skillet hanging by the stove." As they worked together in the kitchen, an easy rhythm began to form. Maya fried the eggs with surprising skill, her hand steady as she maneuvered the spatula. Sam mixed batter for fresh biscuits, humming a tune that Daniel recognized but couldn't place. The quiet domesticity of the scene was a stark contrast to the chaos Maya had fled, and for the first time in days, she felt a fleeting sense of normalcy. After breakfast, Daniel and Sam saddled their horses. "We'll head into town," Daniel told Maya, "get you some proper supplies, and see if there's a way to contact someone you trust." Maya's expression tightened at the mention of contacting anyone. "There's no one," she said quietly, avoiding Daniel's gaze. "I don't have anyone left." Daniel's jaw tightened. He didn't press further. "Then we'll figure out what's next together," he said, his tone resolute. Maya hesitated, then nodded. She climbed onto one of the horses, her movements less awkward than the day before, though Daniel stayed close in case she needed assistance. The trio set off, the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves filling the morning air, as they made their way toward the nearest town, a modest settlement nestled at the edge of the desert. The town of Cedar Hollow came into view after a couple of hours of riding. It was a modest place with a main street lined by wooden storefronts and a few scattered houses. A general store stood at the center, its weathered sign creaking in the breeze. A saloon and a small church completed the humble landscape. As they tied up their horses, Daniel glanced at Maya. She seemed uneasy, her eyes darting around as if she expected someone to appear out of nowhere. He placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "You're safe here," he said firmly. "No one's going to hurt you." Inside the general store, the shopkeeper, a kind-faced woman in her 60s named Clara, greeted them with a warm smile. "Well, if it isn't Daniel Hayes," she said, her voice tinged with familiarity. "What brings you into town?" "Supplies," Daniel replied, "and some clothes for my friend here." He gestured to Maya, who shifted uncomfortably under Clara's curious gaze. Clara's eyes softened. "Of course. You look like you've had a rough time, dear," she said kindly. "Let's find you something comfortable." As Clara led Maya to the back of the store, Daniel and Sam began gathering other essentials: water, dried goods, and a small first aid kit. While they worked, Sam leaned in and spoke in a low voice. "She's got a lot of fear in her eyes, Daniel. Whatever she's running from, it's not over." Daniel nodded grimly. "I know, but she needs time. Pushing her won't help." When Maya returned, she was dressed in a simple blouse and jeans, the stiffness of her posture suggesting she wasn't used to such attire. Still, she looked more at ease than before, and Daniel gave her an approving nod. "You look ready to take on the world," he said with a faint smile. Maya's lips curved into a small, grateful grin. On the ride back to the ranch, the group encountered a small drama in the desert. A lone falcon lying in the sand, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. Maya was the first to spot it, urging her horse to a stop. "Wait," she called, dismounting, and hurrying toward the bird. Daniel followed close behind, his brow furrowing as he knelt beside her. "It's hurt," Maya murmured, her voice thick with emotion. She gently cupped the falcon in her hands, its feathers soft and fragile. "We have to help it." Daniel studied her face, noting the intensity of her expression. "It's a wild bird, Maya. It might not survive." Her gaze shot to his, defiant. "But it might, and we have to try." Moved by her determination, Daniel relented. He pulled a clean cloth from his saddlebag, helping her fashion a makeshift sling for the falcon. Together they secured the bird carefully and rode back to the ranch with their unexpected passenger. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel watched from the porch as Maya tended to the falcon. She worked with quiet focus, applying a salve Clara had given her and speaking softly to the bird as if it could understand her words. "She's got a good heart," Sam said, stepping out to join Daniel. "But good hearts can get broken out here." Daniel nodded, his gaze still on Maya. "She's stronger than she looks. Whatever she's been through, it hasn't broken her yet." Sam let out a low chuckle. "Seems like she's already got you wrapped around her finger." Daniel shot him a look, but didn't argue. He couldn't deny the growing sense of protectiveness he felt toward Maya, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. As the stars emerged, Daniel approached Maya, who was now sitting by the fire with the falcon resting beside her. "Think it'll fly again?" he asked, nodding toward the bird. Maya's lips quirked into a small smile. "I think it will. It just needs time to heal." Daniel sat beside her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "You know," he began, "sometimes we're not so different from that bird. We all get knocked down, but it's what we do afterward that matters." Maya turned to him, her eyes shining with gratitude and something deeper, a connection forged in the quiet understanding of two people finding their way in a vast, uncertain world. The following morning, the falcon seemed stronger. It shifted on its perch, a makeshift platform Daniel had fashioned from an old wooden box, testing its wings cautiously. Maya knelt beside it, her fingers gently brushing its feathers as she whispered words of encouragement. The bird's dark eyes blinked in the soft light of dawn, as if acknowledging her care. Daniel approached quietly, his boots crunching against the gravel. "How's it doing?" he asked. Maya looked up, a flicker of hope crossing her face. "Better. I think it knows we're trying to help." He crouched beside her, his gaze moving from the falcon to Maya. "You're good with it. Patient." She gave a small shrug, her fingers still lightly tracing the bird's wing. "Maybe because I know how it feels to be broken and lost. It's like, if I can help it heal, maybe I'll figure out how to do the same for myself." Daniel didn't reply right away. Instead, he reached out, his hand resting on hers briefly. "Sometimes healing starts when we stop running. You've been through a lot, but you don't have to face it alone anymore." Maya's eyes softened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned her attention back to the falcon. "Today might be the day," she murmured, almost to herself. "I think it's ready to try flying again." Later that morning, Daniel, Maya, and Sam made their way to the edge of the ranch where the desert stretched endlessly before them. The falcon, now secured in Maya's hands, appeared alert, its sharp eyes scanning the horizon as if sensing the freedom just within reach. Maya took a deep breath as she walked ahead of the others, her steps deliberate as she climbed a small hill. The wind swept through her hair, tugging at the loose strands, and she paused at the crest, gazing out at the vast expanse. "Whenever you're ready," Daniel said from behind her, his voice steady. Maya glanced back at him, then looked down at the falcon. "You can do this," she whispered to the bird, her tone both encouraging and reflective, as if speaking to herself as well. She extended her arms. The falcon perched delicately on her fingers. For a moment it hesitated, its wings half spread, as if debating whether to trust its instincts. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, it took off, its wings beating against the air as it climbed higher and higher. Maya watched with wide eyes, her breath caught in her throat as the falcon soared. The bird circled once, its silhouette a sharp contrast against the brilliant blue sky, before disappearing into the distance. A single tear rolled down Maya's cheek as she lowered her hands. She turned to Daniel, her expression a mix of joy and longing. "It's free," she said softly. Daniel nodded, stepping closer. "So are you." Back at the ranch, the day passed in a quiet rhythm. Maya helped Sam with small chores around the property, her movements growing more confident as she settled into the environment. Daniel couldn't help but notice the subtle transformation in her demeanor. There was still an air of vulnerability about her, but it was tempered by a newfound determination. That evening, as the three of them gathered around the dinner table, Sam cleared his throat. "So, Maya," he began, his tone casual but curious, "what's next for you?" Maya paused, her fork hovering over her plate. She glanced at Daniel, then back at Sam. "I don't know," she admitted. "I never thought I'd get this far. I just wanted to get away." Sam nodded thoughtfully, leaning back in his chair. "Well, sometimes not knowing is a good thing. Leaves room for possibilities." Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "You've got time to figure it out, Maya. No rush. But whatever you decide, just know you've got people who care about you now." Her eyes darted between the two men, her expression a mixture of gratitude and apprehension. "Thank you, both of you. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." Sam waved a hand dismissively. "Kindness doesn't need repayment, young lady. Just pass it on when the time comes." Over the next few days, Maya began to find a sense of routine at the ranch. She helped Sam with his horses, learned how to repair fences, and even tried her hand at cooking more elaborate meals. Each task brought a small sense of accomplishment, a reminder that she was capable of building a new life, one piece at a time. Daniel, meanwhile, found himself drawn to her resilience. He admired the way she threw herself into every challenge, even when it was clear she was still battling her own fears. Their conversations grew more personal, their shared moments filled with unspoken understanding. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Maya broke the silence. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice tentative, "about stopping the running." Daniel glanced at her, his expression encouraging. "Yeah?" She nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to stop and figure out what I really want, not what someone else decided for me." "That's a good start," Daniel said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "And what do you want?" Maya hesitated, then turned to face him. "I want to be free, truly free, to make my own choices, to live without fear." Daniel's smile widened, but his voice was serious. "You deserve that, Maya, and you're stronger than you realize. Whatever you decide to do, you'll make it." Maya held his gaze, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper. For the first time in a long while, she felt a glimmer of hope, fragile but real. The next morning, Maya announced her decision. "I think it's time for me to move on," she said, her voice steady. "I need to keep going, to figure out where I belong." Daniel and Sam exchanged a glance, both of them proud but slightly saddened. "You'll always have a place here," Daniel said, "if you ever need it." Maya smiled, her eyes glistening. "Thank you for everything." They packed her a small bag of supplies and saddled a horse for her. As she prepared to leave, Sam gave her a firm handshake. "Take care of yourself out there," he said gruffly, "and don't be a stranger." Maya turned to Daniel, her gaze lingering. "I don't know how to say goodbye," she admitted. Daniel stepped closer, his voice soft. "Then don't. Just promise me you'll take care of yourself." "I promise," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As she rode away, Daniel watched her until she disappeared into the horizon, a bittersweet feeling settling in his chest. He knew she had a long journey ahead, but he also knew she was strong enough to face it. And as the wind carried away the last traces of her presence, he whispered to himself, "Fly free, Maya." "It's a refuge," Daniel said, as they descended the gentle incline leading to the ranch's main grounds, "a place where time slows down and freedom feels like something you can still hold on to." Maya gazed ahead, taking in the scene before her. The ranch was bordered by a sturdy wooden fence, and inside it, horses of various breeds grazed peacefully in the amber glow of late afternoon. The wind carried the scent of hay, leather, and distant rain, a mixture that somehow felt grounding, even to someone like Maya, who had always been on the move. As they entered the fenced area, Daniel dismounted from his horse first, turning to offer his hand. "Come on," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "There's something I want to show you." Maya hesitated briefly before taking his hand, sliding down from the saddle. Her boots met the soft dirt, and she steadied herself, her fingers lingering in his for just a moment before pulling away. Daniel led her toward the stables, where several young foals trotted clumsily after their mothers. Their awkward, unsteady movements drew a surprised laugh from Maya, her face lighting up with an expression of pure wonder. "They're beautiful," she murmured, leaning on the wooden fence to get a closer look. One of the foals approached curiously, its large, innocent eyes fixed on her as it sniffed the air. Tentatively, she extended her hand, and the foal nuzzled her fingers, its soft nose tickling her palm. A small, unguarded laugh escaped her lips. Daniel, leaning casually against the fence beside her, smiled at the sight. "They're quarter horses," he explained. "We raise them here for everything: racing, rodeos, trail work. But these little ones remind me that even the smallest, most fragile start can grow into something strong and enduring." Maya continued to stroke the foal's soft fur, her smile lingering. "They're incredible. So small, yet they're already so resilient. I've never been this close to one before." Daniel's gaze shifted to her as she spoke, her voice filled with an innocent awe that he hadn't heard before. "Fragility is just the beginning," he said quietly, his tone thoughtful. "Sometimes it's a reminder that strength is waiting to be uncovered." For a moment Maya turned to meet his eyes. The sun's warm light cast a golden hue over her features, making her look ethereal. She glanced away, her cheeks coloring slightly, but her smile remained. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel led Maya toward the ranch house. Its carved wooden doors opened into a spacious living area adorned with Navajo rugs, handcrafted furniture, and soft lantern light that bathed the room in a warm glow. The air was filled with the faint scent of cedarwood and sage, evoking a sense of comfort and belonging. "This place isn't just a house," Daniel said, stepping aside to let her take it all in. "It's a sanctuary, a space to hear your own thoughts, to figure out where your spirit wants to go next. Out here, it's just the wind, the land, and whatever's in your heart. No one else gets a say." Maya turned to him, her eyes wide with gratitude, but tinged with uncertainty. "Why are you doing this for me, Daniel?" "You don't even know me." Daniel held her gaze, his expression serious, but kind. "Sometimes people cross paths for a reason. Maybe you think I'm helping you, but who knows? Maybe you're here to teach me something I don't even realize yet." He hesitated, his voice softening as his eyes searched hers. "In helping you, maybe I'll find something I've been missing too." Maya's breath hitched at the intensity of his words. She looked away, her face warming under his gaze. Her hair, now free from the desert's dust, fell in soft waves around her shoulders, framing the delicate lines of her features. When she finally met his eyes again, her expression was unreadable, but her voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Maybe?" Later, Maya was shown to a private section of the ranch where a small enclosed courtyard awaited her. The space was serene, its borders lined with flowering bushes and softly glowing lanterns. A shallow stone basin filled with clear water reflected the night sky, its surface rippling gently with the wind. Nearby, a white linen robe and fresh towels were laid out on a wooden bench. "This is for you," Daniel's housekeeper, Clara, said as she guided Maya into the courtyard. "After all you've been through, I figured you'd need a moment to yourself. Take all the time you need." Maya nodded, her throat tightening at the gesture. As Clara stepped back, Maya removed her boots and stepped into the cool water. The sensation was instantly calming, the tension in her body easing with each step. She let the water lap at her legs, her reflection mingling with the scattered stars above. Leaning back against the edge of the basin, she closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The scent of lavender and eucalyptus filled the air, mingling with the night breeze. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to let go, to feel the weight of her exhaustion, her fears, and her uncertainties drift away with the ripples. From a quiet corner of the courtyard, Daniel observed Maya, careful to remain unseen. Her silhouette against the starlit sky was captivating, her graceful movements hypnotic as she immersed herself in the basin. He found himself smiling, a quiet admiration flickering in his eyes. "She's stronger than she thinks," he murmured to himself, the words carrying a note of quiet resolve. As the evening deepened, Maya emerged from the water, refreshed but contemplative. Clara greeted her with a soft smile and handed her the robe. "Dinner's ready, whenever you are," she said gently. "Take your time." Maya nodded and dried off, her thoughts still swirling as she slipped into the robe. The soft fabric enveloped her, its warmth a welcome contrast to the cool night air. When she finally stepped into the dining area, she found Daniel waiting for her at a table, set with simple but elegant care. "You look at peace," Daniel said as she sat down across from him, his tone almost reverent. Maya met his gaze, her smile small but genuine. "I think I am, for the first time in a long time." "It's a sanctuary," Daniel said as they descended into the lush expanse before them. His voice carried a reverence for the place, a refuge where time moves slower and the air itself feels freer. The horses' steady pace led them into the heart of the hidden ranch, an oasis of life amid the harsh Arizona desert. The wooden fencing surrounding the pastures creaked faintly in the breeze, and beyond it, animals grazed lazily under the shade of sprawling mesquite trees. Daniel dismounted first, his boots crunching on the gravel as he turned to help Maya down. She hesitated for a moment, still unused to accepting help, but finally took his hand. Her fingers were cold, despite the warmth of the day, and Daniel held them just a fraction longer than necessary before letting go. "I want to show you something," he said, motioning toward the fenced enclosure. Maya followed him, curiosity flickering in her eyes as they approached a corral where young colts, lean and wobbly-legged, pranced nervously alongside their mothers. She stopped short, her breath catching at the sight. The tiny creatures, so full of unsteady energy, seemed out of place against the harsh backdrop of the desert. "They're incredible," she whispered, stepping closer to the wooden railing. One of the foals, emboldened by youthful curiosity, trotted to the edge of the pen and sniffed her outstretched fingers. Maya giggled softly, a sound so light and pure that Daniel found himself watching her instead of the animals. "These colts remind me of what this place is all about," Daniel said, leaning on the fence beside her. "We raise them here, trained some for ranch work, others for long treks through the desert. But no matter what their purpose ends up being, it all starts here, with their first shaky steps. Fragile beginnings don't mean weak futures." Maya ran her hand gently over the colt's velvet soft muzzle, her expression softening. "I've never seen them up close before," she admitted. "They're so small, but already so determined." Daniel smiled. "That's the desert's lesson. Everything that survives here learns how to grow strong, even when it starts small." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the ranch, Daniel led Maya toward the main house. The heavy wooden doors creaked open, revealing a large sitting room that felt more like a time capsule than a home. Ornate Persian rugs covered the floor, their intricate designs rich with history. Cushions embroidered with desert flowers adorned the low seating area, and lanterns hung from the ceiling, casting warm, golden light across the space. The air was thick with the scent of sandalwood and spices. Maya stopped just inside the doorway, her gaze sweeping the room with awe. "This is beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This place is more than just a house," Daniel said, his voice softer now. "It's a space to think, to breathe, to figure out where you're headed and who you want to be. If you want, it can be that for you, a place to rest until you're ready for what comes next." Maya turned to him, her brow furrowing slightly as she studied his face. "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked, her voice tinged with both gratitude and suspicion. "You don't even know me." Daniel held her gaze, his dark eyes steady and sincere. "Because I believe the desert doesn't bring people together by accident. You think I'm helping you, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you're here to show me something I haven't figured out yet." His words hung in the air, weighted with a meaning Maya couldn't fully decipher. She felt a blush creep into her cheeks, and she turned away, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "You don't have to say anything," Daniel said gently. "Just rest. You've had a long journey." Later that evening, a soft knock at Maya's door drew her attention. A young ranch hand stood there, offering her a bundle of neatly folded clothes and a shy smile. "Mr. Hayes asked me to bring this for you. He said you might like to freshen up." Maya thanked him quietly and unfolded the garments. A light cotton dress in a soft shade of blue shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its simplicity was matched by elegance, with small embroidered details along the hemline. Moments later, she stepped out of the room, the dress flowing around her like water as she walked. The ranch hand led her down a short corridor to a small private bathhouse tucked behind the main house. The space was lined with polished stone, and warm water filled a shallow tub at its center. Candles flickered on every surface, their glow reflected in the ripples of the water. "The bath is ready for you," the ranch hand said. "Take your time." Left alone, Maya slipped out of her dusty clothes and into the warm water. The heat seeped into her skin, loosening the tension that had built up over weeks of travel and fear. She leaned her head back against the edge of the tub and closed her eyes, letting the gentle scents of lavender and cedarwood wash over her. Somewhere beyond the walls, the faint hum of the desert's nocturnal symphony reached her ears, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of wind through dry grass. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt safe. The night deepened, and dinner was served in the ranch's outdoor courtyard. A long, low table sat under a canopy of string lights, their soft glow mingling with the silver brilliance of the stars. Maya appeared at the edge of the courtyard, her steps hesitant but graceful. She had changed into the dress Daniel had sent for her, its soft fabric catching the light with each movement. Daniel looked up from his seat and felt the air leave his lungs. She was radiant. Her golden hair fell in loose waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, though still shadowed by recent hardships, carried a quiet strength that took his breath away. "You look beautiful," he said simply, as she approached the table. Maya's cheeks flushed, and she glanced down at her hands. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The dinner was a quiet affair, filled with easy conversation and moments of comfortable silence. As the meal wound down, Daniel found himself drawn to Maya's stories, brief glimpses of her past and the resilience that had carried her through her darkest moments. He listened intently, offering no judgment, only understanding. By the time they finished eating, the stars above seemed brighter, and the chill of the desert night had settled in. Daniel offered Maya a soft wool shawl, and they lingered by the table, their voices growing quieter as the night stretched on. As the conversation faded, the stillness of the desert seemed to seep into the courtyard. Maya wrapped the shawl tighter around her shoulders, her gaze lifting toward the heavens. The stars, unimpeded by city lights, stretched endlessly above them, a canopy of brilliance that made her feel both small and infinite. "You know," Daniel said softly, breaking the silence, "out here, under the stars, it's easy to believe anything is possible, like all the pain and hardship are just smaller somehow." Maya nodded, her voice carrying a quiet reverence. "It feels like they're watching over us, like they've been here through everything, and will stay long after we're gone." Daniel tilted his head toward her, studying her profile in the soft glow of the string lights. "What is it you're looking for, Maya? Out there, beyond this place?" Maya hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the fringe of the shawl. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Maybe I'm looking for something I've never had. Freedom, maybe, or purpose. But part of me wonders if I'm just running because I don't know how to stop." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "There's nothing wrong with running if it's toward something better, but at some point you'll have to stop and decide what you want. That's the hard part." His words lingered in the air, and Maya felt their weight. She turned to him, her voice quieter now. "And you? What are you running from?" Daniel's smile faltered, and for a moment a shadow crossed his features. "I guess you could say I've been running from ghosts," he said, his tone heavy with unspoken pain. "Mistakes I made, people I couldn't save." Maya's gaze softened, and she reached out, her fingers lightly brushing his. "You don't seem like someone who runs away." Daniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Maybe not anymore, but it's taken me a long time to get here." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the night wrapping around them like a blanket. The gentle murmur of the desert wind filled the space between their words, and for the first time, Maya felt a fragile sense of peace. The next day dawned bright and clear, with the warmth of the morning sun breathing life into the ranch. Maya awoke feeling lighter, though she couldn't quite place why. Perhaps it was the stillness of the night before, or the quiet understanding she and Daniel had shared under the stars. After breakfast, Daniel approached her with a suggestion. "There's a canyon nearby," he said. "It's beautiful this time of year, with the river cutting through it. Thought you might like to see it." Maya's eyes lit up. "I'd love that," she said, the enthusiasm in her voice surprising even herself. The ride to the canyon was breathtaking. The path wound through rolling hills and patches of desert wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. Maya felt the tension in her chest ease with every step the horses took, the natural beauty around her offering a kind of solace she hadn't known she needed. When they reached the canyon's edge, Maya gasped. Below them, a winding river glinted like a silver ribbon in the sunlight, its banks dotted with lush greenery that seemed out of place in the arid landscape. "It's incredible," she breathed, dismounting carefully and walking to the edge. Daniel followed, his expression softening as he watched her take it all in. "I come here when I need to clear my head," he said. "Something about it makes everything feel smaller." Maya nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. She sat on a flat rock near the edge, letting her legs dangle over the side. Daniel joined her, the two of them sitting in companionable silence, as the river far below carved its ancient path through the stone. As the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the canyon walls, Daniel turned to Maya. "You've come a long way, you know," he said. "Not just to get here, but in who you've become." Maya looked at him, her expression a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "It doesn't always feel that way," she admitted. "Sometimes it feels like I'm still that scared girl, running, because I don't know what else to do." "You're not that girl anymore," Daniel said firmly. "You've faced things most people wouldn't have the courage to, and you're still here. That says something." Maya's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she looked away, blinking them back. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Daniel reached out, his hand brushing hers. "You don't owe me thanks, Maya. You've done this yourself. All I did was remind you of what you're capable of." Their hands lingered for a moment before Maya pulled hers back, standing and brushing off the seat of her jeans. "We should probably head back," she said, her voice steadier now. Daniel stood as well, nodding. "Yeah, let's go." That evening, back at the ranch, the air was thick with the scent of rain. Dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, their heavy presence promising a rare desert storm. Maya stood on the porch, watching as the first drops began to fall, dotting the dusty ground and releasing the earthy aroma of petrichor. Daniel joined her, his arms crossed as he leaned against the railing. "Storms like this don't come often," he said. "When they do, they're a reminder that even the desert needs a little help sometimes." Maya smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on the rain. "Maybe we all do," she said. Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe. As the storm rolled in, the two of them stayed on the porch, the sound of rain on the roof a soothing backdrop to their quiet thoughts. Maya felt something shift inside her, a small but significant piece of her heart beginning to heal. She wasn't sure where her path would lead next, but for the first time she felt ready to face it.